Welcome everybody to Lunch with Leaders. This is a pre-recorded panel that will prompt our discussion on June 8th at 12 p.m. On Zoom. It's part of our Lunch with Leaders series that is a program of the H.E. Butt Foundation and the Hill Country Alliance. My name is Cliff Kaplan. I am the program director for the Hill Country Alliance, and I'm very excited about today's conversation, which focuses on the perspectives of younger leaders in our communities in the rural areas of the Hill Country, and their experiences influencing the course of their communities and of our region. I thought that before I introduce the panel and before I introduce our moderator for today, I thought that I would take a moment to lay out a little bit of the context. As most people have recognized, our communities in the rural Hill Country are getting older each year. So in 2000, the median age in these three rural Hill Country counties, Real County, Kimball County, and Bandera County, was roughly 41, 43 years of age. In 2019, those median ages had jumped up about 10 to 15, almost 20 years in each of those counties. Excuse me, just 10 years. I'm still working on math, but you can see that in Kimball County, for instance, it's jumped from 43 years to 52, and in Bandera from 41 to 52. In Real County, it's jumped up a little bit less. The percentage of residents in this younger cohort of, say, 20 to 44 years of age in each of these counties back in 2000 was roughly a quarter of each county's population was in that younger cohort. And as of last year, that's dropped to about a fifth. So this is what the numbers indicate. And I can stop my screen share there. This is what the numbers indicate. But we also know, just anecdotally from experience in our communities, that that folks are often graduating high school and heading off to college and not coming back to live in the communities that they're from for some time. And part of that may be, without speculating on what that, on my own speculations, without providing my own speculations, maybe this is a good time to actually open up and invite the panel. So first, I want to introduce Judge Casburn. She's on the steering committee for our Lunch with Leaders program and has been enormously valuable. She is the judge in Sabinal, Texas, where she serves on a number of community groups, including Keep Sabinal Beautiful. And she will be moderating the discussion for today. I also want to introduce Susan Rios, who runs the Main Street program in Uvalde, Texas, where she oversees the coordination and support for about 200 businesses in the town of Uvalde. Andrew Helton is the director of the Kimball County Library. It's his fourth year in that position, and he graduated from high school in Junction, Texas. Has been there since 2014. He's also started a small business in the technology sector. And Candace Morrison from Junction as well is the proprietor of the Honey Bean Coffee and Tea Company. She's also the president of the Junction Area Texas Farmers Market and the co-president of the Mason Farmers Market. I think with that, I will invite any and all of our panelists to correct me if I've screwed anything up in their introductions, for which I apologize. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Judge. And thank you all very much. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
All right, so happy to have you. As Cliff mentioned earlier, this conversation was spurred by Andrew. We were so impressed with him at our last Lunch with Leaders. and what he's done in his community at his young age. And with that, I'd like to start with you, Andrew. You have enjoyed an esteemed leadership position as director of the library, as well as having a tech company on the side. How did you get to this position? Why are you where you are, and how did you get there?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question. I think there's not one specific answer to this for me. I wish there was a super romantic answer as to what ultimately brought me back to Junction after I graduated from college. But I dealt with some pretty serious health complications, and so I had to move back home. And when I moved back home, I wasn't really capable of working full time in any capacity. And I had a good relationship at the time with the previous director of the library, and she reached out to me because she knew that I had technical skills, and that was something that the library needed to have on staff, because obviously there's been a dramatic shift in the way libraries serve communities. And computers and technology are a big part of that. So she asked me when I felt able if I could come in and work part-time. And that I never would have dreamed that I would work in a library. That wasn't really on my radar. Neither was moving immediately back to Junction after I graduated. And if I'm being honest, I struggled with that a little bit because I think that oftentimes we're kind of conditioned to in small towns, especially very small towns, is okay, we get out of high school, we go to college or some other thing, we leave, right? We get out of there. There's bigger, better opportunities that exist elsewhere in metropolitan areas or larger cities, working for larger companies and kind of having the classic career. And I struggled with that a little bit because that's what I expected of myself. I'm like, what am I doing back here in a town with 2,500 people? You know, as somebody who likes technology, like this is certainly not the Silicon Valley. And so that had been a struggle with me for a number of years. But what I discovered as I started to work at the library is there's an incredible need here. And in fact, and this has been expedited a lot with COVID, we're seeing even in small towns, people become increasingly reliant upon technology. And so I stayed put at the library, eventually becoming the assistant library director. And as of 4 years ago, assuming the directorship. And as I've looked around town and I've looked around the opportunities that exist, a big part of what we've done is involving technology. How can we increase the, the education around technology here and helping and assisting people, but likewise engaging with the school system and partnering with them to stimulate, education with the younger kids and getting them to see and know about the opportunities that exist in the world of technology, because it's just all around us now. Can't really escape it. I mean, you can try, but it's kind of everywhere. And so we've enjoyed quite a bit of success with that and having programs and participating in their science day and getting to do science, technology, engineering, math activities with them. And so really focusing on expanding our outreach to the school system and to the kids and families in our community. And so the longer I've stayed in the library, the more I've become rooted here and recognize, like, you know what, at heart, I'm a small town guy. I've always been in small towns. The biggest was when I was at college and at A&M. But I love small towns. I love the culture, and I wanna see businesses. That's part of my business as owning a technology business. What prompted me to start that was I want to see businesses thrive. I want to see them be successful, and I want them to see that technology doesn't have to be this big scary thing, and in fact that it can enhance their capability to serve in their communities and really free them from having to do a lot of things that at one point were all manual. And now they can really focus on the core aspects of their business. And so I'm hoping in the future that I can begin to serve other small communities in our area with those technical skills, and really become more of a small business advocate that enables small businesses to have a wider influence in their towns and communities. So.
Wonderful. And Candace, you're a business owner as well as the president of the Farmers Market and co-president of the Mason Farmers Market. What is the link there? How did you rise to leadership in these, as if running a business is not enough? I'm sure that takes all of your time, but then you've decided to branch out of that and jump into community service in that way. What motivated you to go in that direction?
The main motivation behind both the business and the farmers market is that when I moved to a really small town for the first time in my life, I desperately missed coffee and farmers markets. So I made them. But the farmers market came at a time when we opened in June of 2020, so in the middle of the pandemic. And it was a time that the community was truly starved for safe human interaction and good, healthy food. And then as we grew, we realized just how many micro farms existed in our area that didn't have a place to bring goods to market. So there really was a need there, but it was really a coincidence that we started in the middle of the pandemic, because I had tried to get the farmers market started way before we even had a pandemic. It just was coincidence that City Council finally approved it in the middle of a pandemic. But there just was a great need for a space of community, especially in a COVID year and an election year when so many things were tearing this town apart. It needed something to bring it together. And I had met with some people who were interested in starting a farmers market, and we all looked at each other and were like, okay, let's start it. And they were like, no, you start it. And so I did. And now it's thrived, and now we have Mason. So it's just, there was a need and it needed to be filled. And so the coffee trailer supported the farmers market its first year. And now the farmers market's a little more independent and doesn't rely solely on me pumping money into it. But the coffee shop made it possible that first year, for sure.
How neat. See a need, fill a need. Wasn't there a movie? I think that was Robots that I watched with my kids a long time ago, that you see a need, you fill a need, and you did it, Candace. That's it. That's amazing. And Susan, you found Uvalde by accident with a job transfer, jumped into your role at the bank, and then how in the world did you end up on Main Street?
By luck, I guess, is really how that works. You know, the thing about coming to Uvalde was, yes, it was by accident. I had a background in banking and finance, and that's sort of what I started out here in Uvalde in 2009. Then that actually progressed to a lot of volunteerism. I was involved with Rotary Club and Humane Society and other organizations, as most of us in a small town do. It's all, you wear many hats. And that actually led me to a job opportunity in the hospitality market, where I was a director of sales for 5 hotels, some of them in Uvalde, some of them outside of Uvalde. And I served on the Convention and Visitor Bureau Board of Directors at that time. And Uvalde is kind of new to the Main Street program. And I know from some people, they're like, I don't know what that is. So I encourage you to Google Main Street America and the Main Street program, which is a historic preservation and economic development program. And Uvalde is one of only 88 communities in Texas that has that affiliation. So we needed a Main Street manager, and I had this, which is a big part of tourism and economic development. So having a background with hospitality sales and finance and banking, it just seemed to be a good fit. And sort of talking about where we're headed with this conversation, there was a need to find somebody young enough to do the the activities, but somebody old enough to identify with, to have some experience and identify with an older age market. So it was sort of the right fit to sort of be in that place at the right place at the right time.
Well, the common link I'm seeing among the three of you is that you have been catapulted into your roles, that someone saw something in you and said, no, Candace, you need to start that farmer's market. And Susan, you have the skills to take care of this particular issue. And Andrew, you're the tech guy, and we need tech in our library to bring us to the next level. What challenges, or was there any discouragement or pushback among, or in your experiences? And you can share among each other. Anyone can chime in on that if anyone has come up against a roadblock, whether it be generational in tech industry or ideas and on your main street, Susan, or within your farmers market and chamber activities, Candace. What challenges or pushback have you received? I don't mean to be negative, but we do need to look at the other side.
Yeah, I'll, if I can, I'll just really quick. So in Uvalde, it wasn't so much pushback. There's always sort of a fear of unknown. And I think in a lot of small towns, if you're from there, in a way, it gives you a little bit of advantage because outsiders are sometimes can be feared a little bit that you're going to bring some kind of newfangled way of doing things. But at the same time, that's also sort of the ace up your sleeve is that you are being able to bring these new ideas. So I think, what I hear a lot in the downtown, people have become very receptive to what we're doing, growth and whatnot. But originally I can remember hearing this phrase, and I'm sure Andrew and Candace can identify, we've always done it this way. And I laughed that I felt like we should have t-shirts printed up that says we've always done it this way, because that was just sort of the automatic response is just overcoming that phrase. It didn't really feel so much age was involved, but it was just the introduction of a new idea.
Yeah, I definitely ran into, we'll just say questions, in the library when I took over. At this point, I was pretty familiar with how the library operated and been in it long enough to see, my director gave me a lot of leeway when I was still assistant director to start making changes, because she knew that things needed to change, but also that she was near retirement and she just didn't want to tackle some of it at that point. And so I said, okay, let's do these things. And one of those things was I knew that I needed to make some staff changes, and that's hard, right? Those are hard decisions, but I was like, I have to have the right people in place to proceed forward with this vision. I knew that I wanted to better engage young families and kids in our community, and that we were lacking in that department severely. But we didn't have a children's director, right? We didn't have anybody on our staff that had those connections. And I certainly wasn't going to fit that role as a single bachelor. I was pretty clueless in that world. And so that was one of the first things I did. And did I get some pushback? Yes. I tried to do it as gently as I could, and in the right way and with guidance from my board. But those sorts of decisions, you're never always going to make everybody happy, but in the long run, it's been highly beneficial to the library, highly beneficial to our community, and people see that now. Other changes I just started making with our library was, I was like, look, if a library is going to continue to be a place of relevance, we better look beyond the collection because, libraries are no longer the world's source of information, right? Google is, whether we like it or not. The internet is. That's just the way it is. And there's been this shift over the last 20 years to that being the case. And so I look at our small library, and I no longer see our collection as the most valuable thing we have. I see the people that come in there and the actual space right, of the library itself. And so we started making, through grants and other funding, changes to the interior space and setting it up more with in mind of maybe a community center, and in place where people could feel welcome, somewhat like a coffee shop, even, where you can come and just sit for hours and work or do whatever you need to do, and you're not feeling like you need to go in, get your book, and leave, you know. And so creating more of a familial space, and part of that was a reduction in our collection, and that this has been an ongoing project. Like, we've reduced the size of our collection probably by 5,000 to 6,000 materials in the last 5 years. And naturally, certain book lovers, which I am one, I love to read, but a lot of of our patrons that frequent the library just for books, I was getting pushback on this. They were like, why are you getting rid of all these books? These are good books. And my response was always the same: if they're so good, why have they not been checked out in 25 years? Like, that's the reality. Like, I had the reports and the information to kind of back up my decision making. And certainly I wasn't just arbitrarily throwing books out, you know. There was a method and a means behind it. But those are decisions I've had to make and challenges I've faced as we've tried to kind of turn the library into something more 21st century that's going to be sustainable into the future, so that, you know, it's a place that people are going to keep using. With my tech business, just in short, a lot of people were like, well, how are you going to do this in a town with 2,500 people? You know, there's not enough people here to support. But what I've found is, as I've done it, people kind of come out of the woodwork, and I'm getting contacts from other towns in the area now. And there's a huge need there. And so you're finding, like, rural people are desperate for people with technical skills and abilities to help them in this 21st century age. I mean, there's not that on every street corner here. There's a very limited talent pool when it comes to technology in small towns. And so I feel like I found a niche market personally, that's just waiting to be, you know, served and helped in this regard. So.
Excellent.
I would say opposite from, sorry.
Candace, go ahead, please.
Okay. I would say opposite from Andrew. I didn't receive any community pushback, but most of the pushback was from our local government. So city council in particular. When we started the farmers market, we had overwhelming community support because it was something this area needed. But from our city council's perspective, Junction has never had a farmers market, so they didn't need one. And there had never been anything similar to a farmers market or anything they could compare it to kind of wrap their heads around. And so there was this huge pushback, and then they approved it. And I guess they just didn't expect it to grow as large as it did. And as a person who used to be in every single city council meeting since I moved here, I had to start avoiding city council meetings because it was a constant how to shut down the farmers market. It was like a witch hunt for something we could have done wrong to violate the use of space. And as we've grown, you know, we've planted native seed in our space. We've done trash cleanup in the area before and after every event, which after events aren't usually hard because farmers market people are typically non-trashy people. But it's been really hard to kind of balance the community support on one hand that's, you know, pushing for us to grow bigger and bigger. And then on the other hand, you have city council really pushing against a project because of how new and successful it is. And it's something that as a town government, they're not used to. So that's been the biggest pushback for the farmers market for sure.
So what were the negatives that the city council would bring up against a farmer's market? You've got healthy food, you have community support. What was the negation to that?
That's a really good question that I don't really have a direct answer for, and they didn't really have a direct answer for, because I mean, when I look at the outside of a farmer's market, and when most people look at it, there's nothing really wrong or negative about a farmer's market, but they would bring up huge to them issues, like about how now there's lots of people in the park and people are parking in the parking areas at the park, and that's not really an issue. But we started cleaning the bathrooms, and they complained that bathrooms were being used more, or that we drove on the driving path that hasn't been driven on in 10, 15 years, or that
You were too young.
Yeah, well, no, their favorite name to call me at city council is Little Girl, so it's a it's a real fun game we play. But yeah, that someone older and more responsible needed to be running it and managing it, which I'm all for. I would love for another volunteer project to be taken off my plate. But unfortunately, I've desperately tried to find people to run the market, and it's just not there because of the work that's involved. And that was their biggest issue starting up again, was that they wanted someone older to be running it. And I tried to find someone older. So it's just been random little things that they've kind of tried to pile into a big thing. But yeah.
Interesting.
It doesn't make sense.
Candace, may I ask your age?
Yes, I'm 24.
24. Awesome. Love it. Those are interesting challenges on all three fronts. You know, if you didn't play in the same sandbox, you're not welcome, like Susan encountered. It's always been done this way with Andrew, both of you, and Andrew and Susan, as well as Candace, all three of you. That's kind of the common link there, is it's always been done this way, or it's never been done here in Candace's and Susan's situation. So, and it is great to have transplant blood into places, but it's not always welcome. So I understand that myself. I'm a transplant as well. With those pushbacks, can you counter that with encouragements that you received? Candace, I think you had some encouragers that were throwing you into that position. How did they encourage you to keep the fight?
Well, and that's been a struggle the last couple of years. The community, seeing everyone come out every Saturday morning, and it's truly just the happiest place in Junction every Saturday morning, that helped tremendously. But I think what really helped me start 2021 season without just feeling completely downtrodden was the last city council meeting where we actually did get approved. We had about 35 people from the community pack the city council room. And, you know, our mayor stood up and said, hey, if you're here for the farmer's market, why don't you wait outside? And nobody moved. And it was really kind of awe-moving that, yes, the community cares. But specifically, Hal Rose is a defense attorney here in Junction, and he's on a number of boards. And Carol Neiman as well were two that really came to bat for the farmers market openly in city council and to our city officials, to say that there's really no reason that there should be pushback, and we stand behind what's happening. And I think those older people coming forward and standing alongside an organization and vouching for it is what helped swayed an older generation of city council to agree with it. So it was just the older support that helped older passage of a farmer's market.
What about the other two? Any encouragements on your end, Susan or Andrew?
Oh yeah, every day is an encouragement for me. You know, the unique thing about a Main Street program is it's half historic preservation, which really appeals particularly to an older generation and folks who are multi-generational living in a town, because you're preserving that nostalgia, you're preserving their childhood, and their parents and their grandparents and great-grandparents' childhood. So when they see that happening, they love it. But then on the flip side, you're making this historic downtown, you're keeping it beautiful, you're preserving it, but you're also fostering this space for new and young entrepreneurs to come and bring their business. So it's this really great melting pot of multi-generational togetherness and multicultural generations, in your historic downtown. So it's really great. You're not necessarily going to have somebody 75 years old coming and starting a new business. I'm not saying that's not happening, but you're really going to get young entrepreneurs, but you're creating this space that those 75 and 80-year-olds said, hey, we always did our shopping downtown, and now we've come full circle where that is a thing again. And so it's really a great mixture. So seeing people happy, and you're seeing youngsters, these young 18 to 25-year-olds are like, yeah, I have my first business. I'm this new upstart, but I'm in a brick and mortar in a place that somebody can come and say, oh, my grandfather used to have this space, and so it's really seeing people come together and seeing downtown vibrant again. And so for me, just seeing that and hearing those success stories, we've seen downtown sort of come out of its chrysalis in the last 10 years, and that's just really fantastic. So just seeing those things makes me happy. There's always the little day-to-day wins, the awards, the recognitions from state organizations, but it's really the individual success stories that give you the encouragement to keep doing what you're doing.
I did see an article in the paper. You were on the front page, Susan, with your awards that you were handing out. And that's really important to affirm your community as you're doing with those awards. Tell us a bit about that.
So we started, so I will say this, what's unique about Uvalde being a little bit bigger rural community is we're blessed to have a tourism office, the Main Street office, and a Chamber of Commerce office. So we have all these resources to really sort of boost, whether it's tourism or businesses. But when Main Street came into play here in Uvalde, one of the things we were sort of lacking originally was celebrating businesses and volunteers. So we started a couple of years ago a program we call our Honors and Hors d'oeuvres, which is just our annual celebration where we give out those kind of recognitions. And some of the things we celebrate are businesses that are established, that are what we call our cornerstone businesses. And then we have a new upstart kind of up and coming business award, and we have outstanding unsung hero awards, but it's just a way for us to really give those businesses that are new, that have shown some real spark, and those businesses that have been around for 20 to 40 years that have really kind of kept their sort of, parenting and guiding these young businesses, but also, Candace can speak to this. She stepped up in this volunteer role for farmers market, but the unsung heroes in a small town, most of us can name the 100 people that we see at every single, whether it is your service groups, right, your humane society, your farmers market, already that these are the go-to people in your town, and they don't always get the celebration and recognition. So it's important to give those people the attaboys, because they need those wins too to keep going and helping you, for sure.
Andrew, you've had lots of encouragers. It sounds like that have brought you along.
Yeah. So my library board has been a big source of encouragement for me. Yeah, obviously, when I first took over, I would say I had to cultivate encouragement a little bit there, but by and large, the board now is actually overall a pretty young board. We've just in the last year had some people step down and some new people come in, and really loving the direction of the library and giving me lots of constructive feedback and just ideas on ways that we can continue to kind of advance the library's cause in the community. Obviously, the feedback we get from the community itself is huge. We've worked to develop a pretty robust social media presence, thanks to one of my staff members, and we get tons and tons of feedback from community members just about the activities that we have, and giving opportunities for kids to learn and grow and bring in different performers or educational activities, even from the outside, whether that be like a coding program, computer coding program, or things of that nature. Parents love it. And so they're a huge source of encouragement to say, man, my kid loves this stuff and there's nothing here like that. And so I'm getting to bring those things in and get that community feedback and that community support. And obviously with my side business, I always get encouragement from that, because businesses and the residential people that I work with go about tell everybody else. Sometimes I struggle to juggle both it and the library, but I love the encouragement that I get, and it's been a motivating factor for me to keep going forward. So.
Well, I want to circle back and kind of bring it all together and focus in again on your personal ingredients. We're interested in knowing what brought you to this point, obviously, but let's speculate now for the next 5 to 10 years for you personally. Candace, where do you think you'll be in 5 to 10 years? I know you need to hop off here, so this will be our last question.
In 5 to 10 years, I really hope I'm not fighting the urge to move away from Junction every day. But I mean, personally with the business, I'd love to see the trailer be brick and mortar and have 2 or 3 event trailers that go to small pop-up towns that don't have coffee, and bring access to them and do more wedding events. For the farmers market, I'd love to see kind of the babiness that I've created of the Tri-County farmers market between Menard, Mason, and Junction really thrive to where the Junction vendors are going to Mason, the Mason vendors are coming to Junction, and you have kind of this collective where all of the surrounding towns and areas are working together to bring their very best to the community. And the community grows right along with it and has a space as well. The longer we've existed, the more informational booths like Lions Club, like some of the churches, like the state park have gotten involved just to educate people about what is here. So I'd like to see it grow as more of a resource to the community and not just a marketplace for the community.
And Susan, how about you? Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10?
Hopefully I'm right here growing Uvalde. I hopefully I will be still managing and maintaining the Main Street program for as long as I'm useful and viable to the community. I think that's always the willingness, right? Whoever is in their spot needs to still be willing to grow and change and develop. And I hope that will still be me and then. But Uvalde, I feel like we are blessed and poised geographically, being in the hill country, but also on the ecotone of the South Texas brush country, and the 2 longest highways in the U.S. intersect in my beautiful downtown. And yes, I refer to it as my downtown. I'm very stingy with that because it's such a great place to be. But hopefully that this is it. We're hoping that we're seeing a change in demographics. So Cliff, this was interesting that you brought up those demographics, and I'll be curious what the census data for 2020 shows us. But we're experiencing an influx of young people between 22 and 35 years of age, young Hispanic families moving in from Eagle Pass and Del Rio. So it's kind of interesting where we were losing some young folks that were native Uvaldians were moving to Bexar County, particularly Medina County also. But now we are seeing this whole, Maverick County introduction into the hill country. So I will be excited to see that growth and help those people feel welcome in Uvalde.
And Susan, do you have anyone under you that you're mentoring maybe into this Main Street?
I have a well, I'm a one-man show staff-wise, but I do have an outstanding volunteer advisory board, and many of them are younger than myself. I'm going to sort of wrap myself out. I'm in my mid-40s, so I have a lot of 20-somethings on my board to keep it young and relevant. So hopefully they're, getting some kind of guidance, keeping me challenged. But when I am able, with our Rotary Club, myself and other Rotarians, we mentor high school juniors and seniors for a program we have called Reach for the Stars. So I do try and get involved with that so that we're kind of getting high school kids ready to be involved and good citizens in the community.
I've witnessed Reach for the Stars at the Laurel Tree before. I've seen you all take kiddos places and teach them etiquette, teach them how to interact, and teach them how to be stiller people and civic-minded people. And I've always been so impressed with you at the Rotary Club anytime I've heard you speak. So all three of you are so well-spoken, and I think that has a lot to do with why you're where you are. Andrew, you want to wrap us up with your next 5 to 10?
Sure. Yeah, I've actually been thinking a lot about this lately. I've got big ideas at least. So I would love to see my business become something that is kind of self-running and expands to become a regional player. Because my long-term vision is that I really want to, similar to what Susan's doing in Uvalde, I would love to see transpire here in Junction. And so part of my vision for my business is that it enables me to become a small business advocate and be about seeing kind of the restoration of small town communities. And so that's really what I want to move towards, and hopefully my business can help fund at least the initial part of that, and really start investing back into Junction. I mean, we have this downtown that could be cool in my opinion, but it's not very cool. I talked about this at the last lunch with leaders, and there will be plenty of challenges there. I know that I'll face them, but I would like to be able to really start investing more into my community, and restoring some of the infrastructure here, and hopefully breathing a little life into this place. So that's what I want to do. So
Fantastic. Well, we hope that the three of you will continue to network with one another. It sounds like you have common issues and you have common solutions that could work for all of you. So with that, Cliff, I think we will wrap up today. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to everybody for making time for this conversation. I'm really looking forward to getting it out into the world so people can see it. And then we'll have you all back on June 8th at noon for our Lunch with Leaders program, to kind of open up the conversation further to folks around the region who might be dealing with similar issues in their communities, or just curious and learning more and participating in the conversation. So I'm really looking forward to that as well on June 8th. And folks can keep an eye at the Hill Country Alliance website, hillcountryalliance.org, where we'll post information about that meeting on June 8th. Or folks can also reach out to me directly at cliff@hillcountryalliance.org, CLIFF @hillcountryalliance.org, if you want details, the Zoom info for that meeting, or if you just want to get in touch about anything else. And we'll also post contact information for Candace and Andrew and Susan's for anybody who would like to get in touch with them. And of course, I can help connect you to them as well. So thank you, everybody. This has been a panel discussion for the Lunch with Leaders program, part of Leading in the Rural Hill Country, which is a joint program between the H.E. Butt Foundation and the Hill Country Alliance. So thank you again, Susan, Candace, Andrew, and Judge Casburn, for a really fantastic discussion. And we'll see you on the 8th.